Hey, shalom family. Yes, this is your brother Dana, and I'm coming to you from the city of Atlanta from a place in One Love. As I've said before, these videos are just an opportunity for me to share from my heart to yours in hopes that it encourages you. I know you're looking at the shirt. I know you want one, but I got this the last time I was in Ghana, and yeah. I like it and I feel honored to be able to wear it. As I shared in a previous video, I'm going to take some opportunities like this to share with you some of the stories of my adventure, my journey, while in Chicago for almost 30 years. Because they all had a lesson for me. And I also believe that all of these stories that I'll be sharing with you was all a part of the Most High Yah finding out if I would be worthy enough, faithful enough to Him and to you to receive this truth. And it also was used to, as I say, break down that pride and arrogance of white supremacy in which I was born into. So I'm taking you back to about 1996, early 1997. I had gone to Chicago. I graduated from Moody Bible Institute in the spring of 96. I moved to the north side community of Rogers Park. I had gotten a youth job at a once upon a time very large, physically large, but very large Baptist church. But as regentrification happened in Rogers Park, most, if not all, of those who attended the church, which were white, moved westward. So when they brought me in, they actually were hoping that I was going to bring in youth to the church, but white youth. Over those 9 years while I was there, when pretty much all of the youth were black, I'd go home Sunday after Sunday crying, literally, family, because of the comments that I would get from the elders and the deacons, the deaconess. And why is my youth full of niggers? No wonder why. There was about 25 members left when I got there. So anyways, I got the job and I took this old fellowship hall that was in this church and I put a couple basketball rims and began to walk the streets, living off a stereotype that, all these black young men gotta like basketball. And soon they would come, and the schools in the community learned about what I was doing, and some of the teachers would send some of their troubled kids my way. And in about 8.5, 9 years, I went from 5 young people to almost 500 a week. But I recall back in that beginning time of 1997, late 96, my car had been broken into, I would say at least 10 to 12 times. And so it seemed like every time I'd call my mom, she would be like, now what? Mom, they broke into my car, they ripped this, they broke into my car, they ripped this. I was living in a slumlord apartment. Mice, rats, cockroaches, but that's all I could afford. $350 a month. So you kind of know what it was like. But it's where I wanted to be. It was right on Morse Avenue, right where the gangs were. So I could walk out my front door and be right on the street where I would walk and pray. So anyway, one day I was going to travel down to the south suburbs to visit a friend of mine who we were both at Moody together. And on my way there, I lost my memory. I knew my name was Dana. I knew I was in the city of Chicago, but beyond that, I didn't remember nothing. And I don't even know during that period of time, I must have been driving. I don't quite remember, but eventually a headache came on, and it seemed like my mind began to come back, and I realized that my cell phone was ringing, and this was way before GPS. And I answered it, and was this friend of mine, Doug, saying, "Where are you? It's been over almost 2 hours, and you don't answer the phone." I said, "Doug, I don't know what happened." I made my way down there, and his wife was a nurse, and she was right away concerned about the extreme headache now. But my insurance didn't start for another week. I started a new job, and so that week was up and down with massive headache to always a headache. Finally, that Saturday morning, Doug came and picked me up to take me to the doctor, and when I went to talk to the doctor, immediately he brought me in for a CAT scan. He saw a lump. He then did a spinal tap, and it came back negative, but he says, "You must return on Monday for an MRI. There's something there." So Doug and I were hungry. We went to go to a restaurant, and as we're standing in line, that headache came back, and it came back big time. Had to run to the washroom to vomit, and came back, and we sat at the table, maybe just having the spinal tap and no food, and we were going to begin to eat, and then the headache came back again, but this time to a place where I could not bear it. And so Doug said, "We need to get in the car. Let's go home so you can lay down." But on the way, I can only explain it as this: I lost all strength to even breathe. And as I sat and I felt myself slouching down, and I could feel Doug's hand kind of reaching over to touch my mouth to see if I was still breathing. And at one point, I finally said, "Father, I can't breathe. I didn't have any energy to breathe, and I was going to go home." Woke up at the emergency room. My parents had been called, and they flew quickly from Minnesota as the doctor didn't know if I would see morning. Morning came, and I was pretty stable, and so a brain surgeon came in at the time. And he said, "Since you're stable, Mr. Stevens, instead of doing surgery, brain surgery, because of what they found in that CAT scan," he says, "I want to do an MRI so I can see the details of it." And so they came, picked me up. I went to do the MRI. I came back, and when I got back, Doug, who was a pastor at a church that time, this same friend, had left his church with several of his elders, and they came and they laid hands on me and they prayed. The doctor came in, and instead of explaining the procedure of brain surgery, he had said that the tumor was gone. About a week later, I was released. I still had to spend a couple of nights with Doug and Heather, and I returned home on a Sunday night. That Monday morning, I still could not go to work for a couple of weeks, but my job was walking distance, so I decided that I was going to get up and at least walk over to the job to get some fresh air and say hello. And as I was getting ready, and I had just walked my 6-month-old puppy, like us, I lived in a kind of a ghetto landlord building. I had bzz, bzz was the buzzer, and so I lived above a store, but I was the 3rd floor up, and so I ran down these steps, because usually that indicated to me that one of the guys in my mentoring program was being chased by a gang, and so they would ring my doorbell, I'd let them in my house, and then I would take them to school. That's what I thought. But when I got down there, I looked around, and there was nobody that I knew. Had this feeling, but I went back up, got ready, left, went to my job for maybe an hour, and came back to a house that was burglarized. And the main thing that I'll never forget that they took was my puppy. And as I went, I saw the back door smashed in. The best way I can describe it to you is that my next door neighbor was Her husband was a pastor, and he had passed away, but she was living with her son that was probably 30 to 40 years old, but the best way of describing him would be like the gentleman on the Green Mile. Big, strong, but was not capable of living on his own. But him and I had befriended each other, and he came out his back door, and he was crying, and he said, "Pastor, Pastor, oh, Pastor, I tried to stop them, Pastor. I tried." Making a long story short, my next door neighbor had been watching me for a couple of months, and so Monday morning they thought I would be on my regular routine by being at the job, and so he broke into the back door to then have the other two with him ring the doorbell from the front, and he would buzz them up, and then together they would take their time to take my stuff. But I messed it up because I wasn't at work. Well, two of the gentlemen faced 13 years in prison because after they were caught due to my neighbor identifying them, they were released on bond, but were told not to come around me or try to even contact me. At my job, the state's attorney came in to find a way of escape in case one of these gentlemen showed up there. Well, they tried to show up. And they were put in jail, and they were given 13 years. And I'll remember this when I used to tell the story at my white churches that were supporting some of the work I was doing. Many of them would say, "See, the black people don't want you there." And I would laugh and say, "No, the three people were white." But after that happened, and my dog was gone, I sat on the floor and I began to cry. And I picked up my cell phone. I called my mom and I shared with her, and she cried and she said, "We're going to come and get you." And I said, "Yes, Mom. God don't want me here." She said, "When your father gets home, we'll head your way. 7-8 hour drive." I hung up the phone, sitting there, and all of a sudden my door opened up. And at that time, a young man by the name of Joe had been coming to my youth group and gotten to know him pretty well. So he had a set of my keys, so if I was at work, he could come over and walk the dog. He walked in saying, "Yeah, man, we heard what happened, and I know you're going to leave us just like everybody else. You only stay until things get rough." And he threw the keys at me. "You can have your keys back." And they hit me in the head. Shut the door. Picked up the phone, and I said, "Mom, it's not God that wants me to leave. It's the enemy. And I gotta stay." Family, that was the turning point of the work that the Most High Yah had called me to do. The young men were coming out of the woodworks to come to the church. I believe at that point, he began to really trust me. So I called Joe and I said, "Joe, I'm staying, but I got to move out of this place to a more secure apartment." And that afternoon, I would say almost 40 of the young men showed up at my door, and they had me packed. They had my boxes and everything on a truck. And I was on my way to a new apartment, maybe 5 blocks away. Now, I know many people may be thinking, and a lot of them did say to me, "Oh, Brother Dana, why did you stay in the neighborhood?" Because I was called to that neighborhood. Because I was called to the young people in that neighborhood. And I wasn't going to allow the enemy to push me out. That young man today, I could pick up my cell phone and call him. I could talk to him, or I could talk to his wife, or one of his 3 children. Graduated from college, and is a fine young man. He was about 14 at that time. Today he's 44. And I can bring to you many other names of the young people that I've been blessed to walk with. Alan, Stanley, Gary, Q-Tip, Lala, Pee-wee, Jeff, Guichard. Andrew, Jermaine, Jeremiah. See, I really do believe that before the Father could entrust me with his precious children, he had to make sure that when the going got tough, I didn't get running. And that's why today I am thankful that he's given me the privilege of being a mouthpiece to speak the true truth of who you are, my black brothers and sisters. That you are the precious chosen children of the Most High Yah. You are the true Hebrews. And I hope that my strength to remain with you, regardless of the trials or the hardships that may come, that I will cleave and never run to save myself. Family, this is your brother Dana coming to you from the city of Atlanta, from a place in one love. Shalom, family.